past the draft. We're past the All-Star break. We're past the halfway point of the minor league baseball season, and I thought this would be a good time to kind of sit down and look at the promotions that have been happening not only from the AAA level up to the major leagues, which is the one that most people are probably paying attention to just because it's the players that we're able to see. The Henry Davises, the Nick Gonzalez, the Carmen Majinskis, Jared Triolo, towards the beginning of the season, a Tucapita Marcano. But there have been promotions throughout the entire Pirates minor league organization. Ben Cherington, back at the beginning of June, kind of hinted at the fact that there were going to be some promotions happening, from Bradenton the whole way up to Pittsburgh. It wasn't just going to be the ones that we were going to be able to see. In previous years, it's kind of been, around this point in time in July where a lot of these promotions take place. And I always talk about the trickle down and trickle up effect, even though stuff really can't trickle up, but it does in, an organization from level to level throughout the Pirates farm system. So for a player to receive a promotion, there either has to be a promotion in front of them, or it could also be a player being injured and then going to go on a rehab assignment, which is usually at a lower level. Or, unfortunately, in some cases, it would be a player demotion. And that's stuff that happens a lot of the times throughout the minor league season. You'll even see very random promotions where there would be a hole at, say, even AA or AAA where maybe there's not a player at the lower level who is ready to move up, so they will, sometimes we've seen a prospect jump from maybe high A to triple A, and it's almost like filling in on that roster. And if you look at a minor league roster at times, it can be very confusing because they'll have players listed on the AAA roster, and it'll look like they are either on the injured list or developmental list, at that level. I think I even saw maybe a Solomon McGuire. I saw him from time to time on the AAA roster, and it would be either an injury or developmental. And it's more of, the number of players that you're allowed active and on each roster, and kind of it's almost like when people say it's that paper move. It's not really that the guy is rehabbing or hanging out in Indianapolis. He may be on their roster, but could still be down at Pirate City. It's not like a roster move that we just saw, and I know this isn't a minor league move, but a Rowanzi Contreras option down to the FCL. No, he's actually in the FCL. I guess they could have in some ways, depending on the rules and everything, they possibly could have put him on a developmental list and done sort of the same thing. But, in optioning him down there, it's obviously going to open a roster spot in Indianapolis, possibly for a promotion that they were looking at. And this is some stuff that we could get into later on in this. But I kind of wanted to talk about, and we're going to go from the lowest levels to the highest levels, obviously, coming up with the players that were promoted from Indianapolis to Pittsburgh to PNC Park, and how they've performed. Some of them is a small sample size, some of them is a larger sample size. But for me, the thing that gets to me is that I always talk about I try to put that small sample size on hold to a degree. But, in talking with my good friend Gary Morgan, does the Pirates Fan Forum podcast over at DK Pittsburgh Sports, also my writing partner, co-editor at Inside the Bucs Basement. We talk about how, you may be looking for a player, especially, either in a move from Double A to Triple A, or a move from the Triple A level Indianapolis to the major leagues. You're looking for them to put together, a couple solid weeks, and that may not be, a ton of plate appearances, maybe at most like 50 plate appearances, which is an extremely small sample size, but it's more on, them watching the player and seeing them check those boxes. I don't think that their boxes are, this player needs to reach this certain plateau of an OPS, but it may be, they need to be having, better plate appearances. They need to be taking more pitches. They need to not be striking out as much, pitch recognition, or if it would be for a pitcher that, we want to see them, work on this certain pitch. I know it was talked about, I believe it might have been Dan Kovacevic was talking about how, I believe it was maybe Jamison Tyone, I think that he mentioned that, he was getting so many players out throughout the minor leagues with his curveball, but the Pirates noticed that this would be a pitch that could be hit fairly well, at the major league level. So it was like kind of checking it off there that, you can't throw this curveball to get people out. We want to see, other pitches that you have. So maybe some of this stuff, it may not all be in stats. They just may want to see how a player approaches, a certain hitter from, the left side of the plate, the right side of the plate. Want to see him be able to use certain pitch sequencing to get through that, at bat with that player. So, it's definitely, we're going to be talking a lot of stats on this one. I was wondering whether or not I should do, just the audio version. If I was going to do the video version, I had the video version set up, but I'm pretty sure you guys, you're going to be sitting here listening to me, ramble off a bunch of stats, talking about a bunch of players, but also, would it be good for you to also then, watch and listen to me read off all of these players while, I had made notes on a bunch of them and just jotted down a bunch of stuff. So it would be pretty much watching me, read off my giant yellow notepad. And yes, if anybody follows me or listens to me enough or reads my stuff, I do write a lot of stuff down. It's just something I've been doing since college, where if I want something to be fully ingested into my brain and to take it all in, I actually have to physically write it down, and then it's something that I can, work through better, erasing stuff, and go through my thought process in that way. So this is going to be, like I said, a lot of stats, but it's going to be talking about a lot of players that, we're probably, very interested in. And it's players that have received promotions so far this year. And we're going to be starting off down in Bradenton. And it's basically, players that have moved from the Florida Complex League in Bradenton to the low A Bradenton Marauders. And there have been, 3 pretty big moves that have occurred, prior to, the All-Star break. The biggest one for me is Yordany De Los Santos. Signed for $1.2 million as an international signing, still only 18 years old. In the FCL, he had a slash line of 328, 397, 463. That works out to an 860 OPS. He had a home run, 7 walks, 11 Ks, and that was only in 78 plate appearances. But it kind of does seem that, Ben Cherington and John Baker do have some of these, whether they be benchmarks for certain players to get a certain amount of plate appearances at a level. Usually it's approaching, it's like a cutoff of 100 plate appearances, 200 plate appearances, 300 plate appearances to kind of see, if, they did poorly for the first 100 plate appearances, if they can get a good 100 plate appearances under their belt, or possibly 200 plate appearances under their belt, to see if, if the first struggle for the 100 plate appearance is real, if if the flashes they're showing in the second 100 plate appearances, and then where it kind of works out in the middle. De Los Santos only has 21 plate appearances with Bradenton currently, and things have not gone great for him to this point. Slashing 150, 191, 150 for a 341 OPS. No homers, but if you go back and listen to one of the previous episodes I had done on what I look for within each of the levels, and the one thing that I do look for is, especially for these younger players, is the number of strikeouts, the number of walks that they have. Are they seeing pitches? Are they swinging at pitches? Chase rates, stuff outside the zone. So that will definitely show you a lot. In those 21 plate appearances, Yordany De Los Santos has 13 strikeouts and 1 walk. So that to me just kind of sticks out, that he's getting that time to adjust to this. So I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of the games that he's been in because it wasn't being streamed. So I'm wondering if these are called strikes, if these are things that he's chasing. So it's definitely going to be something that I'm going to be watching. Another promotion that was made, Lonnie White Jr., former second-round pick in 2021, and to this point in his professional career through the FCL and now Bradenton, has only played in 32 games due to injuries. Came out in the FCL. He had 76 plate appearances, slashing 318, 434, 444 for an 879 OPS, 1 home run, 11 walks, 19 Ks. With his jump to Bradenton, only in 18 plate appearances, not going to look so great either. It's a 133, 278, 133. That's a 411 OPS, no home runs there yet, 3 walks and 8 Ks. So once again, the Ks a little bit higher than the walks. I would like to see him also be a little bit more patient to the plate and hopefully get to watch some of these games on the streaming. But we're going to see a player here, and yes, this is an older player. Lonnie White Jr., only 20. Yordany De Los Santos, only 18 years old. Josiah Seitler, he was a 15th round pick in 2022. Had not seen him until this year, and we've still only seen him, for 27 plate appearances in the FCL and 39 plate appearances in Bradenton. In the FCL, he was slashing 227, 370, 364. That's a 734 OPS, 1 home run, 4 walks, 3 Ks. So, kind of seeing the ball there, thinking, what, we just want to see a couple of bats down there in Bradenton, in the FCL, and then we'll bump him up to Bradenton. In his 39 plate appearances, he's slashing 500, 487, 853. That's a 1.340 OPS. That's pretty huge. And we did see him have those 3 home runs. And it's not like this player was, kind of out of the middle of nowhere. He did play for South Carolina for the Gamecocks. He batted 300 with an OPS north of 1,000, 15 home runs, but he does have that problem with strikeouts to walks, more of like that power hitter type guy. In his last season, and it was his senior season, he did play the 4 full seasons at South Carolina. He did have 42 strikeouts, 19 base on balls. So this is a guy that, kind of could be maybe one of those streaky power hitters. Wouldn't see the average maybe sticking up to where it's at right now, obviously. But the OPS, but he's one that I could even see moving up, fairly quickly within this system, because he is 23 years old, to see, how he would adjust to the pitching at the high A level and then maybe start out next year in Double A if he continues to progress. Moving up to Greensboro, the one thing I did notice, I had seen this out there. I knew he was on the 7-day IL, but moved to the 60-day IL. Hudson Head, he was a guy that I really wanted to, see get through a full season, see what he, could do. Had been struggling. Him and I believe Connor Scott, who's up in Altoona, were 2 guys that I said they were kind of from a similar vein, but he moves to the 60-day IL. The first player we're going to look at here, and for Greensboro, this is all pitchers. And Ryan Harbin had been pitching pretty much lights out, started to get on some people's radar, 21 years old down in Bradenton. Had a .83 ERA, a 1.041 WHIP. The WHIP is something, that, when we're talking about pitchers, you'll know with me, that's one of the first things I look at is what is the whip for a reliever slash closer. I mean, that's getting towards, the level that you would want to getting into the elite range of, being down below the 1.00 mark. 44 Ks, 15 walks in 32.2 innings. Only has one inning in Greensboro so far. Terrible inning. 36 ERA. His whip is 5.000. No Ks, 2 walks. I just like to see him. Obviously he's going to get, that was just getting his feet wet, and one good outing will, kind of bring that back into focus. But, just definitely wasn't a great outing for him. The next one is J.P. Massey. J.P. Massey, you'll probably see some of the highlights, was just in the Futures game along with Endy Rodriguez. He's what I've written about him, talked about him. He's a project. He was a project when he was at Minnesota. He had entered the transfer portal when he was, drafted by the Pirates. Came in to Bradenton this year in almost, just over 49 innings, 3.28 ERA. But once again, looking back to that whip, it's the 1.318, and that would be, a decent whip for, somebody who would be, the number 4 or 5 in a starting rotation. Definitely, a little bit of control issues. He's got the 24 walks, 57 strikeouts. In Greensboro, he's got 13.1 innings under his belt, and he has a 4.05 ERA. But for me, like I said, looking back to the whip, it's a 1.425, 7 Ks, 10 base on balls. That's where that whip is going to come in. You put guys on base, and there's a higher potential for them to score. The last guy we're going to talk about, I had seen out there, earlier in the season when he was performing well in Bradenton. Thomas Harrington, comp round A pick, so technically a first round pick from this past season. Campbell University, shout out to the Fighting Camels, and he was pitching fairly well, and we could just go with the whip first here, because a 2.77 ERA is going to tell you he's either getting maybe lucky or whatever, but no, his whip was a 1.103, 40 Ks, 12 walks in right around 39 innings pitched. He's gotten 31 innings, a little bit over that in Greensboro so far. The whip is something that has been a little bit concerning. A 1.421 whip. The one thing I will say is that he has 38 strikeouts in 31 innings, where he had 40 strikeouts in 39 innings in Bradenton. Does have almost as many walks, though, with the 9 base on balls, giving up some hits. But Greensboro is one of those weird places, not only the home ballpark, but also, the places that they play within the South Atlantic League, because if you go back and listen to one of the previous podcasts I did about playing within a bandbox and did some of the dimensions of some of the other stadiums within the South Atlantic League, and there were some that were extremely similar to the bandbox that they play in Greensboro. So a lot of times there, like I said, I'm just looking at the whip, just because that's something I feel like that you can control a little bit more. You're not putting guys on base. I'd like to see that come down a little bit, but we got to move along here. We're only up to Altoona. A player that's performed, very well in his small sample size in Altoona, Braxton Ashcraft, second round pick in 2018, dealt with some injuries throughout his career, pitched in Greensboro for 26.1 innings, had a 1.29 whip, 29 Ks, 5 base on balls, and for people that still want the ERA, it was 3.76, so very solid. You're going to like the ERA in Altoona. It's a 0.00 in 7 innings. But realistically, I'm looking at the 0.714 whip, 7 Ks, only 1 walk in that 7 innings. Guy that big talk on on the Twitterverse today, because he, with the draft and stuff, was bumped out of Baseball America's Top 100. Anthony Solomito in Greensboro, dude, 58.2 innings, 1.159 whip, 68 Ks, 25 base on balls for a 2.30 ERA. I mean, it's just gotten better in the 19 innings that he's pitched in Altoona. A 0.947 whip, 21 Ks, only 4 walks, and a 2.37 ERA. 20 years old. Have just seen him, excel at that point in time. And the two hitters that, one is Jackson Glenn, pretty much one of those senior signees from last year, 25 years old. In Greensboro, I'd written about him a few times and just basically said, I just want to see him get bumped up to Altoona, see what he can do. He had played in Greensboro, I believe, for most of the season last year as well. So he was batting .299, 380 on base percentage, slugging .475 for an .854 OPS. And like I said, that's something within Greensboro. Wanted to see how that would translate. Only had 25 Ks, 17 base on balls, 6 home runs. So far in Altoona, only 25 plate appearances, slashing .318, 400, 455 for an .855 OPS, 5 Ks, 3 base on balls. Doesn't have a ton of power, but is a good hit tool kind of guy. Is extremely, he's old, because even in being bumped up, he's old for the level. Probably around a year to a year and a half older than the average player at Double-A. So just kind of wanted to see what he could do up there. If this continues, I mean, I'm not saying, this is like a second base. This is not saying that this is like a player for the future for the Pirates, but you always need those role players. So when these guys, if they can work out, I mean, that's a huge bump within the draft class when, it's not a guy that you're expecting a ton from. Indianapolis, we saw, one quick promotion in Kyle Nicholas. I wouldn't say super quick because he did pitch 53.2 innings. But with some of the injuries, some of the, struggles at the major league level, there's been some promotions quicker than we may have expected. Kyle Nicholas was a guy that I thought may start his year in Indy, didn't, and has not pitched as well as he pitched during the previous season. In Altoona, a 1.472 whip, 63 strikeouts, 23 base on balls in those 53.2 innings, a 4.36 ERA. That's looking at a guy who is borderline, like, not in your starting rotation anymore. Things haven't gotten any better in Indy. 13.2 innings pitched, a 2.341 whip. That's just not even something that you could even register. 11.20 ERA, just very, struggling immensely up there. And then the one that happened, pretty soon after that in Jared Jones, and that's only after 44.1 innings in Double-A in his career. I mean, Kyle Nicholas had been in Double-A. Jared Jones, only 21 years old, had a 1.083 whip, 47 Ks, 16 base on balls during his time in Altoona. The ERA in Indy is, I know, where most people's eyes are going to go. That's a 5.12 ERA, but I'm looking at the 1.293 whip, the 24 Ks in the 19.1 innings, the 8 base on balls. The last time they brought him out, they put in an opener for him, and I think he pitched like the 4 innings after that. So it's just something to kind of keep an eye on, and especially, with this next guy in Liover Peguero. Liover Peguero was in Altoona again. He's been on the 40-man for the second year this year. He's slashing in Altoona. He was hitting better, which actually brought a lot of these numbers up. 260, 333, 453 slash line, works out to a 786 OPS, the 11 home runs. This is, 58 Ks, 32 base on balls, walking a decent amount. And that was in 318 plate appearances. And that's where I kind of talk about like that, looking for those benchmarks to see if, what he was doing was, it wasn't just like a hot streak, but it was something he could continually do. And he was able to bring that up. Only 21 plate appearances in Indy so far. 222, 333, 333, a 667 OPS, 2 Ks, 3 base on balls. So, I mean, we're going to have to get, a larger sample size with him on that. And now moving up to Pittsburgh, and everybody probably knows a decent amount of these stats. One of the first guys that moved up was Tucupita Marcano. He only had 48 plate appearances in Indy, had a 1,147 OPS, hit a home run, 8 Ks, 3 base on balls. In Pittsburgh, he's gotten that 198 plate appearances. He's getting up towards that 200 mark, where you can kind of see what kind of player he's become. He only has a 663 OPS, 3 home runs, 30 Ks, 10 base on balls. With some players, either coming back from injury, maybe seeing another player move up, different things like that. Marcano's a guy that, you could maybe see them, give him, a little bit more seasoning in AAA or something, getting back on track. I mean, especially when you have a player like Nick Gonzalez, who's recently come up. He had 262 plate appearances in AAA, 820 OPS, and for him, I mean, the big thing is the Ks. It's the 75 Ks to 35 base on balls, and since he's been up here in Pittsburgh, only 58 plate appearances. But the one thing that sticks out to me, just once again, I know he has the 810 OPS, but he has 16 strikeouts and only 2 walks. I look, and he has a 310, on base percentage. That's not ideal. It's going to be hard to maintain an OPS that's going to be above league average if you don't, move that, OPS. If you don't move that on base percentage, more towards like the 340, 350. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's also not great. Henry Davis hitting a slump here in Pittsburgh, 657 OPS. For him, 19 Ks and 7 base on balls, 1 home runs in 81 plate appearances. And to me, that's something that I'm hoping that corrects itself because, I mean, in Altoona, 35 Ks to 32 base on balls, 10 home runs. Even in his short time in Indy and 45 plate appearances, it was a little bit more even with the 11 Ks to 8 base on balls. And then the last player here that's at Pittsburgh right now, and that would be Jared Triolo. Jared Triolo's, he's a decent hitter, he's not going to maybe hit for power this year. We know he's dealing with the hamate injury. For any player that deals with a hamate injury, they are going to have their power maybe a little bit zapped for, at least that season. I mean, we've seen it even with a player that is still struggling, but we saw some power develop in a Matt Frazier. The hamate bone kind of zaps your power, and Jared Triolo didn't have a ton of power to begin with, but did have an 839 OPS in 159 plate appearances in Indy, but is still looking for his first home run of the season. Does not have one in Pittsburgh yet. The big thing for him is that he does have the 364 on base percentage, leading to the 714 OPS, playing good defense. But before we got out of here, and before we get to the beer reviews, I did want to talk about 4 guys that are the next men up, and the next man up. Especially, pitching-wise, we already talked about Jared Jones, but obviously in Quinn Priester. Quinn Priester for the season has a 1.362 whip. He has 84 strikeouts and 35 walks and 86.2 innings. It's a 4.36 ERA. I really don't look at that too much in this. And I had to, I'm trying to people saying, if he's getting this small sample size, how well has he done? And I actually had to bring it down to his last 7 starts. It brings him down to a 1.26 whip, 37 strikeouts, 15 walks, and 44.1 innings. But then I did look, and I'm like, I mean, how many earned runs did he have in his last starts? In those 7 starts, and going back from his most recent to the one that would be 7 starts ago, it's 2 earned run, 4 earned runs, 0 earned runs, 6 earned runs, 1 earned run, 4 earned runs, 0 earned runs. So, I mean, it's been not extremely consistent. I do like that, the whip is down. The whip hasn't really been bad for the entire season, but, would like to see a few good outings put together where, I wouldn't say look dominant, because at times he's looking for contact. He's looking to get out of innings and not putting guys away, throwing the sinker early on in counts. So I want to see that work out a little bit more. And we'll stick on the pitching end here for a second. Colin Selby added to the 40-man this past off season. A 3.86 ERA, a 1.329 WHIP. That's 30 Ks, 15 base on balls, and 23.1 innings. Not great for a reliever to have a WHIP that high. Was on the injured list for about a month. Since coming back, I mean, things pretty much, it just looks about the same. A 3.37 ERA, a 1.37 WHIP, 8 Ks, and 4 base on balls in 8 innings. So less strikeouts, more walks, putting around the same amount of guys, on base, which isn't ideal. And everybody's, one of their favorite prospects coming up here in Endy Rodriguez. Endy Rodriguez for the season has a 732 OPS. Definitely being very patient at the plate. He's got the 342 on base percentage, 46 Ks to 34 base on balls, 5 home runs. And that's over 304 plate appearances. And to be able to get, once again, that small sample size, his numbers to match where you probably want them to be, you had to go back 77 plate appearances. That's an 811 OPS, 9 Ks, 11 base on balls. So he is probably progressing towards, getting that promotion at some point in time here. But a guy that may get the promotion before him, when I was talking about a player like Tucupita Marcano struggling, it's Alika Williams. Alika Williams acquired from the Rays, Robert Stevenson trade. Everybody will talk about how well Robert Stevenson's doing down in Tampa. And I mean, some of us called that in at least a small sample size that he, would be able to perform down there. But just to kind of check his numbers, he had 175 plate appearances in Double-A for Tampa. He had a 731 OPS, 5 home runs, 34 strikeouts, 15 walks. In 110 plate appearances, which I'm talking about, you're getting that over that threshold of 100 plate appearances. He has an 802 OPS, has raised his on-base percentage from 314 to 355, and the big thing here is that he has 13 Ks and 11 base on balls. And I know that this was a lot of information to take in, and it was pretty much me talking stats, but I just kind of wanted to talk about the players that had been promoted and where they could be going. So we're going to take a quick break here and then come back with an even quicker beer review.
A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer, let's order another pitcher of beer. That pitcher of beer should come over here. I love that pitcher of beer.
All right, guys, we got to keep this. We're 30 minutes of Bucs, so even on the minor league side, I went a little bit long there, but I have 3 beers here from Narragansett Brewing, and that is in Rhode Island. And I've noticed that a lot of the breweries are doing the 3 beer mix pack as opposed to the normal 4. So I've thrown another one in here for you. One of my buddies went on vacation, stopped at a brewery on his way back home with his family, and got me a beer that I'd had before, but hadn't had in a while. But from Narragansett, we've got the Fresh Catch. It's a refreshing golden ale, dry hopped with Citra, and it's coming in at about 4.2%. It definitely was good. Not one of my favorite beers that I've ever had, but I'm going to bring that one at a 375, weighted based on batting average, bringing that down to about a 325. The next one I thought was going to be my favorite out of this, and it's the Town Beach Day Pass IPA, and it's one of those lighter IPAs, comes in at 4.7. I'm going to give that one a 375 as well, bringing that down to 325. The one that I thought was probably going to be my least favorite is the Summer Crusher, and that's one of those almost like fruity wheat beers, but it was my favorite. I give that one a 400, bringing it down to a 350, and the last one, like I said, my buddy stopped with his family and got me the Seneca Indian Pale Ale from Mountain State Brewing Company. I've been to the one in Morgantown. was the one that's like near Deep Creek. Good food, good brewery. Giving this one a 4.25, bringing it down to 3.75, and gonna get out of here, guys. But before I go, as always, let's go Indians. Let's go Curve. Let's go Hoppers. Let's go Marauders. Let's go FCL Pirates, and let's go DSL Pirates.